Hello, everybody. This is Mike History 2, and welcome to the History of Australia, Part 3. So, in 1824, Major General Thomas Brisbane, an officer, administrator, astronomer who was the governor of New South Wales, asked Hamilton Hume and William Hovell, two explorers, to lead an expedition to find new grazing land and to find the origin of many of New South Wales's rivers. They left Sydney on October 2nd along with Jeff Burrows, Henry Angel, James Fitzpatrick, William Bollard, Thomas Smith, and Thomas Boyd. They eventually reached Port Phillip on December 16th, making them the first Europeans to explore Victoria before returning to Sydney. Also that year, the colonization of Northern Territory began when Fort Dundas on Melville Island was founded. Now back in Van Diemen's Land, by 1825, which officially became its own colony on June 14th, the Black War had essentially broke out, as during the next 3 years the number of Aboriginal attacks doubled every year. In September 1824, the colonization of Queensland began when Redcliffe was founded as a settlement for prisoners, but 1 year later the prisoners were moved to Brisbane, where they stayed permanently. On January 21st, 1827, the colonization of Western Australia began as well, with the founding of Albany, and in 1829 it was officially colonized as the Swan River Colony before being renamed as Western Australia in 1832, and with this now all of Australia, including the western half as well now, was British. Also in 1827, Fort Wellington was established on the Coburg Peninsula. However, it and Fort Dundas were both abandoned due to Aboriginal attacks in 1829. Now that year, Captain Charles Sturt, a British explorer who was from Bengal, left Sydney to discover the origin of the rivers in New South Wales. He began by travelling down the Murrumbidgee River on January 7, 1830, before reaching the Murray River and travelling down it before he reached the Darling River, which proved that the rivers in New South Wales flowed into it. In February, he reached a large lake, which he named Lake Alexandrina, and soon after reached the sea, which they found was the real mouth of the Murray. This made him the first European to explore the mainland of South Australia. In Van Diemen's Land in November, a black line of 2,200 men was formed, of whom 550, or around half the island's garrison, were soldiers. 738 prisoners and 912 were settlers, led by Major Sholto Douglas. They then attacked in a southeasterly direction to trap 9 Aboriginal tribes across the Forestier Peninsula and into the Tasman Peninsula, which would become an Aboriginal reserve. However, the rugged terrain, scrub, bad weather, vast swamps, bad maps, and poor supply lines caused the line to break and allow Aboriginals to escape. Although the campaign failed and was ended on November 26th after only 2 Aboriginals had been killed, they had succeeded in reducing the Aboriginal threat, and attacks after that decreased significantly. Nevertheless, many settlers were still scared and refused to work after some of them continued to be killed. On the last day of that year, the Black War ended as 28 Myrimaners surrendered, reducing the tribe to a mere 16 men, 9 women, and 1 child. Nevertheless, in the following February, several expeditions were sent to the west-northwest of Launceston to secure the surrender of the remaining Aboriginal Tasmanians, and persuaded many to be transported to Flinders Island, where they just died of pneumonia, flu, and catarrh. But starting in 1833, the 220 left were kidnapped, and by November, all remaining Aboriginal Tasmanians had moved there. By 1835, all of them, apart from one family, had been deported. In total, 219 British had died, while 600 to 900 Aboriginal Tasmanians were dead, and only 46 even remained by 1847. Unfortunately, this wasn't the only place with fighting, as fighting also broke out in December 1831, caused by the shooting in Perth of a group of Noongars who were stealing potatoes and fowls, and this was done by Thomas Smedley. As revenge, a man named Yagan stormed a farmhouse and killed Aaron Erstwhile, a servant of farmer Archibald Butler. The following June, he attacked 2 laborers sowing a field of wheat near Kelmscott, which made him wanted. In October, he was enticed by some fishermen and then pushed into the water. Although he was sentenced to death, settler Robert Lyon argued that he was defending his land against invasion and so should be treated as a prisoner of war and was exiled to Carnac Island. Although Lyon tried to teach Yagan Christianity and English culture, He escaped after a month to Woodman Point on the mainland. A great way of thanking the guy who saved your life. In February and March 1833, he broke into a settler's house and demanded a gun and handkerchiefs. He later threatened a group of soldiers and demanded them to give him food. On April 29th, he broke into a store to steal flour and was shot at by the owner, Peter Chidlow. As vengeance for his brother dying during the robbery, he gathered a group of 50 to 60 men at Bull Creek, where he ambushed a group of settlers loading carts, killing two. On July 11th, William and James Keats, cow herders at Guilford, suggested that Yagan stay with them to avoid arrest. The next morning, as he was leaving, William shot and killed him, but he was overtaken and killed himself. Now, in 1831, Edward Gibbon Wakefield founded the South Australia Land Company to found a colony at Adelaide that would be settled by freemen instead of prisoners and with religious and political freedom. The South Australia Act 1834 was passed by the British Parliament to establish the colony. In 1836, two ships of the South Australia Land Company established a settlement of Kangaroo Island. Wow. And on December 28th, the colony was officially created by a proclamation by its first governor, Sir John Hindmarsh, at Glenelg. In the next 4 years, 13,400 immigrants arrived and 24,900 more in the following decade. But of course, we have to talk about war again. So, in 1833 or 1834, the Convincing Ground Massacre took place at Portland, Victoria, after Gunditjmara and British people fought over a beached whale, after which the British massacred between 600 and 200 Gunditjmaras who defended themselves with spears and stones. In 1838, free settlement in Queensland began, but settlement really accelerated in 1840 as people rushed for land in the Darling Downs, Logan and Brisbane Valley and South Burnett, which caused much fighting with the Aboriginal people. Imagine my shock. Now in 1839, Fort Victoria was established in the Cobourg Peninsula, and this was what restarted the colonization of the Northern Territory. Now the tensions in Victoria had begun with the Convincing Ground Massacre and the founding of Melbourne by John Batman, yeah, I'm not making that up, on April 10th, 1837, escalated into the Umarella Wars, with the first significant action being the Lubra Creek Massacre on February 24th, 1842, when British settlers in Port Fairy shot 3 women, one of whom was pregnant and a child. In 1843, the police was brought in from Melbourne to fight the Gunditjmaras and Jaradwajalis, escalating the tensions as well as the arrival of 1,750 prisoners between 1844 and 1849. In 1843, democracy slowly began when men owning £1,000 worth of land were allowed to vote for the New South Wales Legislative Council, and in 1850 this extended to Victoria, South Australia, and Van Diemen's Land. So I know this is a little short, but that will be all for today. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And for all the people who do watch, I really appreciate it. But I've noticed that like half the people who usually watch don't watch anymore. So if you're watching this, please continue. Anyway, see ya.